Welcome back to Veterans Forum, a program by veterans, about veterans, for veterans and their families. I'm your co-host, Bob West, with Ray Chattery and Jerry Devlin. Jerry happens to be in Annapolis on legislative business, and we hope to get a report from him on our next show. Our goal is to provide important information to you and your family by interviewing leaders in our community as it pertains to legislation, benefits, support, programs, and activities. Ray, who do we have with us today?
Well, Bob, I'm very proud to introduce Chief Warrant Officer 5, Fred Schimber, is Army retired. He's chairman of the Maryland Veterans Commission, past chairman of the Joint Veterans Committee of Maryland, past state commander for AMVETS, and he served on very national committees for the AMVETS. Fred comes from Casper, Wyoming, and he studied business administration at Vance's University. Fred was in the Army for around 36 years and served in Vietnam in 1967-68 during the Tet Offensive, which is of really good information. He has the Legion of Merit, a Bronze Star, several awards, and a Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation, Air Force Commendation, and one thing I know he's very proud of is his Combat Infantry Badge. After retirement from the Army, Fred served as the Senior Program Developer on Warrant Officer Corps Development. He's a life member of the AMVETS, American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Vietnam Veterans of America, and a member of our DAV chapter here in Bowie, and also a associate member of the Marine Corps League.
Yes.
He's very active with the AMVETS post up in Hagerstown. That's where he resides now with his wife, Jeannie. And for information, his wife is a retired Brigadier General from the D.C. National Guard. So they are a military family. And Fred is very proud to have you with us here this evening. And I'll just turn it over to Bob.
Thank you so much.
So welcome, Fred, again.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
So let's start off with the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. I know you keep an eye on those guys, and why don't you tell us what's happening now?
Be glad to. I am chairman of the Maryland Veterans Commission, as Ray led into. I work directly for Secretary Chow of the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. And there's a lot of initiatives going on around the state. They're very active in trying to provide benefits and services that our veterans of Maryland have earned. And they're going about it through the different agencies to try to work with them to help provide every bit of entitlement that we've earned. They're expanding their service officer cadre, expanding actually down here to PG County. At least that's in the current governor's budget, to increase the number of benefit service officers by 2 here in PG County. And that's always a good benefit because there are so many veterans here in PG County. I think they have the largest contingent of veterans in the entire state. And so hopefully that'll increase. The budget will be passed, and you'll have 2 more benefit service officers here in the state. There's some other initiatives that the Secretary and the staff is involved in, such as the development of Fort Howard for another state veterans home, something similar to Charlotte Hall, which is so popular and doing so well, but it's also at capacity, as you know. And so they're really busy. Of course, we're all restricted by money, and we all know how the economy has been the last few years and how it's impacted on our veterans. But we still have the Veterans Trust Fund. It's up and running. We have applied to be a 501c3 trust fund, and we've helped dozens of veterans with grants or loans to help make ends meet through the state. And no state money, by the way, it's all donations. And then the commission, of course, the commission has 28 members, which represents 18 veteran service organizations that are all chartered, congressionally chartered by the federal Congress. And then we have a representative from each of the congressional districts. And we have 2 members at large. One of them is a female veteran at large, and then one for a past national DAV Commander Claude Caligari, who has been a member of the commission for 54 years, and he's still a member at large. But just a lot of activity. This is legislation session, as we know. That's where Jerry is, and battling for our entitlements and some more benefits for us. And the department is extremely active in trying to secure what we can for our veterans.
One of the things that we keep telling our members is benefits are available, but you have to get out there and apply for them. And one way to do that is through the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. Yes. Or you can come by one of the service organizations, and they would be more than happy to show you how to sign up and find out about your benefits. And if you're a family member of a veteran, you too want to stop by, and you can find out about these benefits too. So that, but the important thing is you have to reach out so that we know you're out there and find out about your benefits, because they're not doing you any good if you're just sitting at home waiting for something to happen.
That is so true, Bob. Absolutely.
Now, you talked about the Maryland benefit service officers that we have currently here, and we're going to have 2 more. It just kind of to show you that there's some interest, people are actively involved, and you know, the money goes where the activity is, and so we're very pleased to hear that they're going to possibly send down 2 more people to do the service officer activity, and that means it's a greater opportunity for you to get involved and find out what benefits are available to you. So now we can kind of move on to what Fred really wanted to talk about tonight, which is his role with the Maryland Public TV Salute to Vietnam Veterans. So Fred, tell us about that program.
Well, thank you, Bob. Yeah, that really is near and dear to me. When we were briefed a year ago by the president and CEO of Maryland Public Television about their initiative to give a welcome home, a proper, respectful welcome home to the Vietnam veterans, the welcome home that we never got when we came home, I couldn't stay unretired. I had to come out and get back in the workforce. I competed for this position as coordinator, and it's a 2-component, 3-year project, and it includes all Vietnam veterans of Maryland and the surrounding states. Maryland Public Television has a huge footprint. They're the only television station that covers the entire state of Maryland, to include Delaware, Pennsylvania, part of West Virginia, Northern Virginia, D.C., and huge coverage. And this initiative is to welcome home Vietnam veterans from all that entire footprint area. And the intent is to try to bring closure. We're obviously getting much older, and it's now or never for a lot of us. And it's going to be honorable, respectful, dignified, 2-day event. Now, I mentioned 2 components. The first component is a 3-hour documentary. Now, this 3-hour documentary is being filmed now. Begins with a listening session. So if there's any folks out there, veterans, that have a story. Now, everybody's story is unique because it's unique to themselves. But sometimes there's something a little different, a little more unique than others. And so we're asking folks to come in to a listening session. We call them listening sessions, and they're held throughout the state. We've had 9 of them so far, about 10 to 15 veterans and veterans' families. I do want to emphasize we have a spouse of a Air Force pilot that was shot down early in the conflict, and she tells her story. Anyway, then we ask them to tell their story, just to talk. And a lot of Vietnam veterans don't like to tell their story. But we've been around bars, and you get a couple of veterans together with a beer between them, and we know how those stories kind of tend to grow. Well, in our listening sessions, there's no alcohol, no cameras, anything. We just allow them to talk. And it's amazing how open some of these veterans become all of a sudden. They start realizing that they're with 10 or 12 brothers, if you will, and they start opening up. And so these unique stories become even more unique. And it's really interesting. Then our executive producer, who is an Emmy Award-winning producer, Ken Day, screens these veterans, these stories, if you will, and he invites them to MPT Studios up in Owens Mills. And that's where they can come in and they can sit there for an hour and a half, 2, 3 hours, whatever it takes that their comfort factor is to talk, to tell their story.
Okay, so the initial process is going around the state for these listening sessions. Now, who selects the 10 to 15 people initially that are going to be part of these listening sessions?
Excellent question, Bob. And we're seeking for those individuals that will take the responsibility of establishing a listen session. For an example, at the DAV post would be a good location to hold this listening session and have someone identify 10, 15 veterans, Vietnam veterans or families, and bring them in at a certain day and time, and then we'll go from there. So we're asking someone to step in and raise their hand and say, I'll arrange a session, and I'll have qualified people, veterans that we know are Vietnam veterans, and we'll take charge of that. And then we bring them in, and we listen. And
one of the unique things, Fred, for the three of us is we were all boots on the ground in Vietnam. I was Air Force, so the chow was a little better, but
and so the living conditions.
Yeah, sometimes the air conditioning.
Yeah, I was
out.
just going to say.
So we could go on with for an hour on that stuff. But also, there's a huge number of veterans out there that are Vietnam veterans that have a tendency to be overlooked, and that's our fellow comrades that were in the Blue Water Navy.
Yes.
Off the shore, and yet, you know, they're still Vietnam veterans. So would they be considered part of this group?
Absolutely,
too?
Bob. Yes, sir. And to justify that, we've already have several Navy folks that have come forward, and interestingly enough, their stories about their Vietnam experience is as powerful as some of the Marine stories I've heard, some of the Army stories I've told. Okay, leave it at that. But it's amazing some of their experiences that I never gave it a thought before I got involved with this. Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Taney here in Baltimore. You know, that was Vietnam. That's called Queen of the Sea, I think. And they were actually, they served a tour in Vietnam. And there was 170 men on board, and one of those men lives here on the Eastern Shore, and he's been interviewed. So Coast Guard, all the services, and the uniqueness of this, what we're trying to do is to select those that are actually being filmed, is we want to try to cover the years 1963 through 1975, and all the services, all the branches, services, as many MOSs, specialties as we can. To have a little diversity is the intent, is to not have a whole bunch of 67, 68 guys in this documentary. Mm-hmm. We want to avoid that. We don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but we want to try to cover a chronological sequence of
Mm-hmm.
of the war, and so that's how we identify a lot of those participants. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a spouse that tells her story about when she was notified of her husband's demise, that he was
Mm-hmm.
shot down. And the story is just, really overwhelming. It's
Well, speaking of women, too, is primarily we think of women in uniform are nurses.
Right.
And we know how important the role that they have played in all of our conflicts. Mm-hmm. And I would assume that there will be a segment on those folks too.
Yes, sir. We do have. We've already interviewed and have on film three nurses from different services that did serve in field hospital, served in the Blue Water on board, and that received some of the wounded Marines. And so we have them. Of course, they're not nurses. We show the pictures in the background while they're filming. We have a collage of their pictures of when they were. You know, they all got old. I didn't. You know, they all look. It's really interesting. Anyway, in the background, and then they talk, and so we have those nurses, and when they were in their prime, if you will, and then they tell their stories about what they experienced, about how they the wounded and how they were wounded. I mean, any wound is bad, but Vietnam wounds were, well, they didn't have the technology that they have nowadays for our brothers in Afghanistan and Iraq. So yes, we do have all those covered. So we have their listening session, and then we have the filming. The 3-hour documentary, it'll consist of about 70 stories, 60 to 70 stories to cover 3 hours. And we're doing this similar to, I don't know if you've heard of Ken Burns.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
he did those real famous ones like
exactly,
Civil War and so forth.
Exactly. Well, this guy, Ken Burns, no disrespect by using that terminology, but he's doing a 12-hour documentary called Vietnam, which he's going to release in September of 2016. Well, we were going to piggyback off that because PBS has more money than Maryland Public Television, so we were going to piggyback off that, but we realized that in September of 2016, what happens? That's election season.
Right.
Who wants to compete against all those campaign ads, you know? So we decided the documentary is going to be aired in April of 2016. Then the second component of this, and I realize we're restricted to time here. Second component is a 2-day event. We have where we actually have veterans come on site to the LZ Pimlico. We call it LZ for landing zone, a safe place. That's where many of us knows that was home. We made it to an LZ. We were dropped off there, but that was home. The way home was in an LZ, and it's going to be at Pimlico on June 11 and 12, Pimlico Racecourse, and there's a whole story reason why we chose Pimlico. But we're going to have all kinds of events. Huey display, Huey flyover. Of course, there's no Hueys in service now, so we have to get them from Georgia, or they happen to have some in Georgia. Chinooks. We're going to have a field hospital, a MASH. We're going to have vet centers. We're going to have different the VA medical centers have set up so they can administer and take blood pressure and things like that, and a whole array of events and activities. One big thing is we're going to have a huge map of Vietnam made out of this special vinyl that's kind of thick, 140 foot by 108 foot wide, and it's the map of Vietnam with the cities and villages on it, and we'll have dozens and dozens of Sharpies where Ray can walk out there to wherever he served, and he can bend down there and write Ray Chattery 1903 to 1904. I was seeing if he was listening. With the French, exactly. So that's the intent, is to everybody that's there can sign, or if they lost a son or a family member, not a son, obviously by then, a father, a brother, they can sign their name and the date that they were there. Then this map, weighs about 700 pounds, will be maintained by MDVA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Maryland Historical Society. And that's one exciting thing. That's going to be phenomenal. And then we just have so many things that we're trying to plan. One of the guest highlight, we're trying to get Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, Gary Sinise.
Right.
Even though he was never a veteran, but you know what he's done for veterans.
Tremendous. Right.
And so we're trying our best to book him. That's quite a chore. But anyway, it's just, the idea is to try to help bring closure. And it's for the entire family. It's not just for us that had boots on the ground. It's for the Vietnam era, because they supported our effort. They supported us while we were there. And they deserve this closure. They deserve this recognition and the welcome home just as much as those that had the boots on the ground. So it's a very aggressive project, huge undertaking. It's the largest in the history of Maryland Public Television. And a budget of $2.7 million, money in, money out. There's nothing, MPT's not after any money. They just want to pay the bills, and that's all it's going to amount to. Huge, but it's going to be, respectful and honorable, or else I would have never signed my name to it. I wouldn't come out of retirement.
Well, I was really happy that you said it's going to cover the entire years of the Vietnam War, because yes, we all know about the Tet Offensive, and that has a lot of coverage. We also know about 1975, when the United States was getting out, and the images of the people on top of the embassy trying to climb on top of those Hueys and get out of town. But very little is known about, you know, the years, the early 60s, as well as, you know, the intervening years between 68 and 75.
You're absolutely right, and that's what we're finding out about as we interview a lot of these. It's really an educational process for me. Plus, we're going to, by the way, we're going to have an educational component. We are working with Maryland Department of Education, the MPT Education Directive. Is working with the Maryland Board of Education to have an educational component for the K through 12. And we're going to have a traveling show to go around to all the schools. Hopefully we'll have field trips coming into Pimlico to, you know, to try to help preserve the memory, because they're not teaching anything about Vietnam now. I guess you guys know that. My granddaughter's a senior this year, and I asked her several times, what have you heard about Vietnam? Just what you and Nanny have said, you know. And that's pretty much it, you know. So we're spending we're going to spend a lot of that money on the educational component to help preserve that memory of this.
Now, you know General Anderson, right?
Yes.
And then Ed Pulaski, he's a retired colonel. He was on the buildings in Saigon when they were bringing the last troops out. You might want to get a hold of him.
I'll get that information.
Because he was there at the very end of '75 in May when they were putting the last troops on the plane, one of the last ones to leave Vietnam.
Oh, wow. That would be interesting. I was given a name and a number, and I haven't vetted it, so I really probably shouldn't even be mentioning it. But
he was also he was the Veteran of the Year for Maryland year before he was 98, I was 99.
That's where I've seen the name. Okay, all right.
So
well, there was I guess there was an image of the last man getting in the helicopter. He was actually killed in 9/11 at the Pentagon. His daughter is a Navy veteran, and I have her contact information, and I think that's got to be an interesting story right there in itself. And you're right. We hear so much about just certain portions of that war, and I forgot that it actually started before '63. We all know we had advisors over there in the late '50s.
Right.
But DOD, Department of Defense, has actually decided, well, not decided, it officially got involved in '63. And then, of course, April 30th of 1975 is when they pulled him off the embassy, and that's when it officially ended.
Well, the Marines made the first big in March of '65 is whenever they hit the beach at Da Nang. The 3rd Marine Division is whenever they're there, right?
Yeah, I've learned so much on this. I've only been on the job for about 4 months now, and it's just amazing. I thought I knew it all. You know, it's just one of those kind of, like I said earlier, about how old some of these people have gotten, and not me, but I had really was not a student of it like I have become, and it's amazing.
Well, there's a lot of history even before the Marines landed in Da Nang.
Oh, yes.
You know, with Ho Chi Minh right after World War II,
right. Oh, yes, right.
and that sort of stuff, and the French.
Right.
Yeah, it goes way back. And,
a lot of mistakes were made.
Yeah. And then, of course, well, there are just so many stories, and that it's just amazing. And so anybody that's interested, you know, as we go around, feel free to contact me, Fred Schimber at Maryland Public Television. And if you're interested, or if you know of someone that has a story that's willing to talk to us, we'll let's get a hold of me and let's work this out. I don't want to bypass anybody. This is for all veterans in the Maryland area, and we want to do what's right. And,
well, as we get closer, as you said, Fred, we're going to have a day here set aside at the DAV in which we're going to do some of these interview sessions. And as we narrow that date down, of course, we're going to put it on air here for our listeners to know. And we'll get it out in our newsletters, our service organization newsletters. We can always put a post in there and run that for a while. But again, the most important thing is to get people active in coming out to the service organizations to finding out what's happening like this sort of thing. And here's an instance where maybe you had a family member that served in Vietnam that may or may not be with us any longer, but you know the story. And it's those kinds of stories that that we're interested in hearing also.
Yeah, Bob, they really are, because those are the ones that'll be lost. And that's why they need to be captured on this in this documentary, and it's preserved forever. I mean, it'll forever be recorded, and we need that. That's what history's about. And so those stories are extremely important, and they're not meant to be kept by just one person. They're meant to be shared. You know, it's that emotional trauma and all that. They're meant to be shared.
And the other thing too is not long ago someone had asked. They were doing a project at the University of Maryland, and was asking about Vietnam, and I brought out my scrapbook, and I was looking through it, and obviously I hadn't opened that in decades.
Yeah.
I found my airline ticket from to Vietnam that we had.
Really?
Yeah, so it was leaving New Jersey on the flight. I should have kept the one coming back as the one I should have had.
Well,
but it's a lot of those sorts of things, and
it really is
and
amazing.
Patches and so forth.
A listener, a veteran, over at the Eastern Shore, I had asked for some pictures to share with me, you know, because we're going to make a photo gallery for our website. By the way, we do have a website and everything, but I wanted to do a photo gallery, and we're still going to. But I asked him to bring in some pictures, and he hugged me and thanked me for he finally got them out after 40 years. He brought it in a stack like this, and I started looking at them, and wow, of course I knew no one, but just each picture told a story. And in fact, the last picture was the last bomb dropped in Vietnam. It had the last one, and it had the last bomb, and they knew that was it. So on the last flight, that was the last one out of the aircraft, and that was it. So they were all sitting on that. But it was amazing and interesting to see that. So the stories, pictures tell, they're very important. So.
Well, the last bomb is just about dropped here.
That's
we're running out of time.
Yes, sir.
So we certainly want to thank Fred Schimberg for showing up and telling us about these projects that are coming up. And we need to get you involved in these projects. And we hope you've learned something for you and your family. We want you to get involved. Stop by the DAV. Stop by the American Legion. We're there to help. And not only to help the veteran, but also to help veterans' families. Please stop by and do that. We also want to thank Tom Allen as being our director and cameraman tonight. If you have anything for us, please let us know. You can drop notes off at the DAV. We'll certainly get information to Fred on his program, and we're certainly going to be looking for some volunteers in the not-too-distant future to be part of the Vietnam experience. So we want to welcome all of you new viewers, and thank you again for watching Veterans Forum.